Hello, welcome. My name is Gurpreet Singh, and I'm the director and co-founder of Ethical Reading. And today we're talking about how to build a healthy and ethical workplace. This is an introductory module to our series of modules around this topic. It's a very core to our mission as Ethical Reading. And we initially launched this initiative in 2019, in the middle of 2019, to quite a bit of success. We rolled it out inside Reading Borough Council, particularly the largest department there, and adult health and social care, and also to the leadership team of Reading Police. However, soon after we launched it, COVID struck, and of course that changed the world of work. And what we're looking at today now with this relaunch is really to incorporate those differences that have happened in terms of the work, but also maintain some of the key principles that we had in the original training. So a couple of minutes on what is Ethical Reading. We are a not-for-profit social enterprise. We're actually incorporated as a community interest company, and what that means is that any money we make has to go towards our purpose. And our purpose really is to help embed ethics into the way we work and do business, and to create a community in Reading of organizations that believe in that and actually put that into practice. We want to inspire leaders and people who work inside organizations that they can make better decisions in the round, taking into account the people and the planet as well as profit. We want to provide the resources for them to do that. So that's tools, education, whatever it takes. And also we want to work with other organizations and our partners who support us to collaborate around this mission. We run lots of events around our core programs. We involve our partners and other people and experts in that. Over time, what we hope is that we develop a sustainable approach that can be replicated in other regions and cities. Now, we couldn't do what we do without the support and help of our partners and supporters. So you see them listed here, and we're grateful to all of them for their active involvement in what we do. We simply couldn't do, as I said, what we do without their help. Now, what are we trying to do with Ethical Reading and with particular healthy and ethical workplaces? What we're trying to create is an area, a region, where a strong ethical culture prevails in all types of organizations, whether they're public sector or private. We want to ensure that organizations have a positive impact on society and the environment. They take the well-being of their staff seriously. And as we'll see, actually, the well-being impacts performance in significant ways. And that employees feel empowered, engaged, and valued, and they treat each other with respect, compassion, and responsibility. And of course, core to that is values. And this goes back all the way to the Stoics of ancient Greece. But we definitely believe that in a world where things are changing very rapidly, technology is changing, the structure, the demographics are all changing incredibly fast, both inside the UK and globally, that actually what really is important when people make decisions are the core values that they take to heart. And for us, these are key in providing a framework for organizations and individuals to make the right decisions. What we mean by right is actually balancing the need for profit with the impact on the employee and on the planet. So there you see inside the circle our core motto, if you like, which is enabling ethical action. That's surrounded by the core values, such as respect, responsibility, fairness, integrity, compassion, social purpose, and collaboration. And for us, these provide a framework for making decisions in the absence of any other requirements. For example, there may not actually be any laws around at a particular time to guide you in terms of what to do. And these provide that ethical framework. Now, if you work in a public sector organization, you may be aware of the Nolan principles, and actually they're very similar to these, and you can map them almost one-to-one, which we have done when we did the work with Reading Borough Council, for example. So, what are your core values of your organization? Are you even aware of them? Do they even have them? And are they just values that appear in text on dusty old books on the walls? Are they actually lived inside that organization? For us, that is key. It's not good enough just to have these core values and pay lip service to them. So we provide guidance to organizations through a code of ethics that everybody signs up to when they join Ethical Reading. And we also provide an implementation guidelines, and these are free to download on our website if you don't have them. So the key to think about when you're thinking about values is actually, do you live them? How do you as an organization, as an individual, put those values into practice? I'm going to hand over to Clinton now so he can take you through how you might assess your work culture in a number of different ways. Over to you, Clinton.
Thank you, Gurpreet, and hi everyone. I'm Clinton Wingrove, delighted to be with you here today. Yes, the whole issue of how do you assess your work culture is a really important one. And of course, there's lots of ways that organizations have typically done this. First of all, people have often used exit interviews, and from those we've learned that probably 2/3 of people who leave an organization are actually leaving the relationship they've had with their manager, a critical part, obviously, of work culture. We also see organizations using employee engagement surveys, probably one of the more robust methods of making assessments of work-based culture. And we'll be coming back and looking at that later when we look at the business case for healthy and ethical workplace activity. Another area is level of employee relations issues and tribunals, and we've seen significant increases over the last few years as a result of tightening of employment legislation, and of further increases in that legislation are likely to occur. And it's interesting to see the impact that culture has on the experience of customers. So customer satisfaction surveys and secret shopper reports often give an indication of the culture that you're experiencing in your organization. And let's remind ourselves of the impact of poor workplace culture. What we know is we get decreased well-being, leading to chronic stress very often, mental health issues and poor physical health. And of course, that's the experience of the employee. But the business experiences reduced effectiveness and performance at an individual and an organizational level. And also we see that increase in potential for illegal and fraudulent behavior. And many of us can remember examples that have become highly reported in the press. But an interesting way of assessing workplace culture was developed by Steve Simpson, a psychologist at the turn of the 2000s. And he coined the phrase unwritten ground rules. And what he found was that people's perceptions of how things are done around here is a very important indicator of the culture that you have. And I'm sure all of you who've joined a new organization, that might be an employment organization, it might be a social one, you very rapidly learn that there are rules about how the organization works, which are often not legal rules, they're often not organizational policies. And these unwritten ground rules can help you to understand how the organization works and what its culture is. And they explain why many organizations have vision, missions, values, policies, and procedures which don't produce the desired results because the unwritten ground rules work against them. And what you find is that new staff members absorb these unwritten ground rules from the moment they join. Often, actually, they can even detect them during the interview process. And what we see is if an employee goes against any unwritten ground rule, they risk being ostracized by their colleagues, being talked about, perhaps not advancing in the organization. So these are really important. So the question is, how can you identify what these unwritten ground rules are? And the answer is very simple. You can get groups of employees, often anonymously, to answer the question, around here, how do things work? So you get them to complete that statement. So here's an example. You might work in an organization where the value statement says we treat each other with respect at all times. We're courteous and value others' opinions. And I'm sure that will resonate with many of you. But then you speak to individual employees, and what they tell you is the unwritten ground rule is when the boss attends meetings, people don't give their real opinions. It's dangerous. Keep your mouth shut. Another example might be a value statement. Our organization is open and accountable. And yet, the unwritten ground rule is don't go into the boss's room if the door's shut, especially before certain types of meetings or on certain days. So getting employees to answer that question, getting them to provide their conclusions to those sentences around here, what happens? And that might be the way things happen. It might be what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable. And if you get groups of employees to fill these out, you'll find a mix of positive and negatives. And what we know is if you work in an organization where there are unwritten ground rules which go against your values, where you've been presented with an image of the organization which is inconsistent with your experience, your well-being will be affected. And what I'd like to do now is to pass back to Gurpreet, who'll talk about some of the effects that these unwritten ground rules and negative cultures can have on organizations. Back to you, Gurpreet.
Thank you, Clinton. I'm now going to look at why having a healthy and ethical workplace matters. There is strong evidence base, both academic and in business, that shows that if you have an environment at work where people are respected, they understand their responsibilities, they understand how their work fits into the greater picture, and that strong ethical culture is actually lived, that actually people are have a better well-being. They are healthier, they sleep better, they actually live longer. Their overall well-being is better. And there's a strong link between such cultures and well-being. Furthermore, we also know from evidence-based research that if you have people who are working that are healthy and fit and eager, then what you find is actually engagement at work is higher. So there is a link between improved health and well-being and engagement. And of course, we know from other research that higher engagement is directly correlated with better performance. So in many ways, this is the crux of a healthy and ethical workplace in terms of why you should be thinking about it. A strong and ethical culture through improved health and well-being leads to greater engagement and potentially higher performance, up to, in fact, somewhere between 20 to 30% if you do this correctly. Now, of course, there are many organizations that think they can take a shortcut here. And if there are shortcomings in the culture, they will bring in the odd yoga class, the odd class around improving resilience and so on. What we're saying is actually those are not sustainable approaches to creating a strong and ethical culture. The foundation for sustained performance is creating a strong ethical culture that supports improved well-being on a long-term basis, not on a sort of short-term, let's fix this issue basis. So let's now turn in a little bit more detail around the benefits of having a healthy and ethical workplace. We've talked about people being more engaged and also people being more productive, significantly more productive. So this is essentially money on the table that's being left and not being tapped into. Increasingly, what we're finding is that the younger generations that are coming out of university into the workforce these days are taking decisions around where they work based not just on financial considerations. In the past, that might have been the case, but certainly today, they take a broader perspective. It's about how, for example, the organization impacts society. Recent survey shows that over 62% of millennials, for example, want to work for an organization that has a positive impact on society. And if you have a culture where people are encouraged to engage with the local community, there's a social compassion element to the work that's done, as well as creating a fantastic workplace. This is a real draw for people who want to work for an organization that is consequential in that way. So, if you're desperate to get the top talent today, a healthy and ethical workplace is a key deal for you to get those people. Now, of course, if people are respected, if they feel relaxed, if they feel healthier, and their well-being is better, they're going to be more inclined to be creative and innovative and to share their ideas, share their thoughts with their bosses and colleagues. And in a world today where actually the humdrum, if you like, has been automated through tools such as ChatGPT and the large learning models, you can create boilerplate templates for a lot of content. However, that's okay. But if you really want to stand out from the crowd, you need to be able to tap into the top talent and have them work at their full potential. And a healthy and ethical workplace creates that environment for them. If you do all of this, of course, it creates greater trust. And trust is the bedrock of engagement and trade, not just inside organizations, but of course between your suppliers, yourselves, your clients, your customers, and your organization. So as you engender greater trust, it will impact your bottom line. All of this in turn positively impacts your brand perception, and you get into a virtuous circle then of improving engagement and productivity and so on. So this is significant impact on your bottom line, on your brand, in terms of a healthy and ethical workplace. That's all well and good, but what does it mean for the individual? Why should I, as an individual, be invested in creating a healthy and ethical workplace? Well, we've seen already that actually much research and experience shows that if you create an environment where people are respected, they're going to be happier coming into work. They're going to be happier on a Monday morning at the prospect of working for your organization. They're going to be healthier, significantly healthier, both mentally and physically. And if you're an organization that can make clear to that individual how their work contributes to the overall purpose of the organization, their sense of purpose, their sense of worth is significantly improved. And we know that impacts their satisfaction at work and their self-worth as well. So they get a sense of purpose. And if they and in such an environment, they're more likely to share their ideas. And as we've seen today in a world where there is fierce competition globally and locally, being creative and innovative and understanding where you can stand out from the crowd, that's incredibly important. They're more likely to share their concerns. There may be issues, for example, changing work processes where people that are closer to that work process know certain things will work, won't work. And if you have an environment where people are respected, they're more likely to share their concerns about things that may not work in the end. So what you want to create is this learning culture that people aren't afraid to make mistakes. Obviously, we don't want to encourage lots of mistakes all the time, but mistakes happen. The key thing is that people learn from them and that they share their learnings with other people inside the organizations, and they're not castigated for making the odd mistake, but they are encouraged to learn and share their learnings broader. And as an organization, everybody then benefits. So that's a benefit for the individual and the organization. I'm now going to hand over to Clinton, who's going to look into the business case for a healthy and ethical workplace. Back to you, Clinton.
The fact that you're watching this video suggests that you're already somewhat interested in the concept of a healthy and ethical workplace. But many of us working in organizations are faced with people who are less receptive, somewhat skeptical, or even averse to discussing the idea. And frequently for them, some form of financial justification is more effective. So I want to take you through a very simple spreadsheet that provides an indication of what these factors that we've been discussing have as their impact on the bottom line. I'm going to start by working with a small organization. This spreadsheet's available from Gurprit and Ethical Reading and can be used, therefore, with any size of organization. But here you can see we're going to be working with an organization of 40 employees, an average salary of £28,000, and we're allowing 18% as the likely overhead cost, benefits, etc. Now the question is, how engaged are the employees in this organization? What we're using here is average research data from typical organizations working in the Western economy. What you frequently find is that you'll have something in the order of 12% in the fully engaged category. These are people who don't need to be managed. They often work as though the organization is one that they own. They proactively look for improvements in what they can do. They seek to help other people. They're actively engaged. We then look at what percentage of people deliver 100% of what you pay them for. No more, but no less. And again, research indicates that that's typically something in the order of a further 55%. Forming 77% are actually producing what you're paying for or more. The question then is, how many people do you have who are what we call somewhat engaged? These are the ones when you look out the window, they're in the smoking zone. Every time you go to the water cooler, what you find is that they're there. Interestingly, they're at the front of the lunch queue. They're the ones rushing in, perhaps just a few minutes late, the ones who typically have to leave perhaps that little bit earlier. And what we find is that, again, research indicates that typical figures are in the order of 25%. And that leaves us then with a small percentage who are disengaged. These are the people who clearly don't want to be here. They're often a distraction. They cause a distraction on other people. Very often, these are the people nobody will admit to ever having recruited. And frequently, these are people who are often moved into another role to make space for someone more positive. So now the question is, what do we get from these people in terms of their contribution? And I'm not talking here about their level of activity, their level of busyness. I'm talking about the level of positive contribution that they make to the organization. And again, what we know is that the fully engaged, what are often referred to as top talent, produce significantly more than they're technically paid for if you look at their role description, their KPIs, etc. These are the ones who often set out to beat the targets that they're given. They raise the bar themselves. And indications are that typically you get something like 22% more than you're actually paying for. Now, of course, your 55% of people who are engaged, they're doing what you ask them to do, no more, no less. So that's 100%. So what about the ones at the water cooler, the ones outside in the smoking zone, the ones always at the front of the lunch queue, etc.? And again, indications are that this figure can range quite wildly, but it's typically round about 75%. So then the question is, what about the disengaged? And interestingly, whenever I ask senior managers or board members what they believe they get from these people, they give me negative figures. They say these are the people who are disruptive. They actually reduce the productivity of other people. But let's be positive. Let's not adopt a cynical view. So let's work on the basis these produce something in the order of 55% of what we're paying them for. So now the question is, what's the impact? And what you see in the fifth column is that you see that from the fully engaged, we're actually getting something close to £35,000 worth of productivity that we're not actually paying for. But look at the effect on the bottom two rows. We're seeing significantly losses accumulating in a net cost of £95,287.36. What we're seeing is a significant loss. We're paying for productivity that we're not getting. So now the question is, what can you do about it? And what we've been discussing so far, the things that you can do to achieve a healthy and ethical workplace can have a significant impact. If we look now, the question is, of the 22 employees who are engaged, how many of those, by creating a healthy and ethical work culture, how many of those could we encourage and move into the fully engaged category? And the evidence is that probably about a fifth. So let's put in 4. So 4 out of those 22, with some effort, with some attention to the culture, we could move up. Now the question is, what about our somewhat engaged? These are the people, perfectly capable, good employees. They're just not really focused. They're just not got that energy and that focus. This group we found is actually significantly easier to move. So we can probably move, let's say, 5 of those out of that category up into the engaged category, where we're getting everything that we're paying for. No more, no less. We're not looking to increase their anxiety and stress. We're just looking to help them become more focused and more productive. Now, of course, the disengaged, those 3 employees, they're going to be more difficult. So the question is, how many of those can we move up or move out? And I've put 1. So we've adopted a cautious approach. Now the question is, what impact has that had on our finances? What you'll notice is in the right-hand column, the impact of that effort. What we've now got is an additional 32,000 in the fully engaged category. We've got 33,000 pounds worth of additional productivity in the somewhat engaged, and we've reduced our losses by pulling back 17.8 thousand from the disengaged. The net effect overall is a cost benefit of £77,184, 5.8% of total payroll. And our experience is that if you present the concept of healthy and ethical workplaces to those who are skeptical or those who are anti, and demonstrate to them the financial benefit that can be accrued, they're much more likely to be supportive. And just note one thing, we allowed for investing nearly £6,000 in trying to achieve this. For an organization of 40 employees, that's a very realistic figure. So I'd like to hand it back to Gurpreet. Over to you, Gurpreet.
Thank you, Clinton. So welcome back. And what I want to just emphasize here is that this introductory video, which you've just seen or coming to the end of, is one component of our overall Healthy and Ethical Workplaces training program. And this is composed of 12 mini workshops. And these are 1 hour in length. They run over lunch, so you can, as I say, munch as you learn, a bit like a sort of a brown bag type of session. They're interactive, so these aren't recorded. They're like this. This is a recorded session. However, the mini workshops are live, and they'll be presented by Clinton and other presenters, and you will be able to ask some questions and talk in those sessions and share your thoughts with other people. They contain knowledge and skill development content. You'll be able to share your thoughts and ideas as well, as I mentioned before. The default price for these is £25 for each participant per module. However, We do have a 40% discount till the end of September to everyone. So we're making this really quite significant discount. So we want everyone to be able to at least taste, if you like, these modules and just experience the 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 depth of content and knowledge that you can get from them for a very modest £15 per module. After that, we have a still quite significant 20% discount for people that are staff from our partners of Ethical Reading, and for anyone that wants to book 5 or 4 modules. If that is the case, then just let us know and we will provide you with a discount code. Of course, if you would like a more bespoke solution for your organization, then we're very happy to talk to you about that as well. So I'm going to hand back to Clinton now, so he'll take you through the individual modules in a little bit more detail and explain some of the content there. Over to you, Clinton.
Thanks again, Gurpreet. Yes, there are 12 modules. I'll just briefly describe them. Further details will be available on the booking site where you can see the content. The first one, management matters. We now know that the key differentiator of sustainably successful organizations is the caliber of their management. So in this model, we look at things like what do employees want? And we look at the care model. We look at poor use of time and stress. We look at managers' priorities and the use they make of their time. And we look at a detailed model of delegation and some simple concepts of what we call behavior engineering. In the next model, we look at why is belonging and inclusion important? With global swings in support of and against diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is still one of the hottest topics of debate in many organizations. In this model, we explore this issue, why it is demonstrably important, the value it brings, and how as individuals we can take action to build DEI into healthy and ethical workplaces. In the next module, we look at psychological safety and specifically building trust. As Gurpreet mentioned earlier, trust is the bedrock for successful organization, and psychological safety is the absence of fear. But it's also about understanding that people might have completely different points of view to you, and it's okay for them to express that. That's quite important for the future of organizations. As we become more diverse, it's more and more likely that people might not agree with everyone on every issue. In the next module, we look at the power of interactions. For the majority of us, we spend our working life interacting with others. We do so not thinking about the fact that we're biologically evolved to live in a quite different world to the one we now occupy. We have extremely powerful mental processes that instinctively categorize people into friend and foe and even change the chemistry of our bodies to increase our ability to fight or flee, for example. So in this module, we look at the interactions we have with others and how we can improve those. In the next module, secrets of productivity. Frequently, when you talk to people about increasing productivity, the assumption is that that will correlate directly with increased anxiety, increased stress, and increased mental ill health. The evidence is growing that that correlation actually is flawed, that frequently people are already in a position of stress and anxiety. And if we can actually reduce that, we can increase productivity. So in this module, we look at the productivity equation, current thinking, and some of the myths, and how we can actually address improving productivity without increasing stress. In the next model, we look at the impact of remote working. Remote working was always believed to be something that was not desirable for organizations, and then COVID struck. And of course, overnight, organizations suddenly realized that remote working was a requirement. It was essential, not just desirable. Now we're seeing the pendulum swinging back. So in this one, we explore what are the impacts of remote working, positively and negatively, in the context of healthy and ethical working, and what can organizations do to maximize performance whilst meeting the expectations of their staff. In the next module, we look at communications that work. We look at the different modes of communication: verbal, vocal, and visual. We look at the importance of attention and how difficult it is in the current highly volatile working environments to maintain attention. And we look at the important skills of questioning and listening. In the next module, we look at making meetings matter. We share some statistics on the phenomenal increase, the explosion in the number of meetings that are being held around the world, but also the catastrophic results of those meetings, where estimates that are over 3/4 of them fail to achieve objectives, if indeed they had any. We look at how to address that dilemma. In the next module, we look at building and sustaining super teams. We talked earlier about the difference between people who are engaged and people who are fully engaged. In this module, we look at the difference between good teams, those teams that consistently meet the expectations of them, and super teams, the teams that actually drive and excel, the teams that increase the bar themselves. We look at the characteristics of those teams and what you can do to achieve such teams within your organization. But of course, things don't always work out well, do they? So in the next module, we look at handling difficult conversations. Why do we find conversations difficult when we've been practicing language for hundreds of thousands of years? How do we handle conversations well so that even if the topic was difficult, we still sustain good relationships? And of course, it's often difficult conversations that add to anxiety and stress. So in the next module, we look at how do we manage anxiety and stress? How do we detect it? How do we minimize our risk of being exposed to it? How do we spot it in other people? And then in the last module, we look at building resilience. And we show that resilience isn't just about stiff upper lip and bearing through difficult times. It's about how do we handle well when situations where stress arises? How do we get through it quickly? How do we recover fast? And how do we learn from it? So that's a quick overview of the modules that we've got. I'd like to hand back to Gurpreet. Thanks, Gurpreet.
I just wanted to summarize the key takeaways from this session. A healthy and ethical workplace is really, in our minds, a triple win. It's a win for your people inside an organization. It's the win for your organization, and it's a win for the broader local community. So in our mind, really, there is no reason to not to embrace creating an ethical workplace culture. And of course, here we've just focused on the positives, and there are enormous positives we've seen in terms of the business case that Clinton has just come through. There are also reasons from a negative perspective. If you create an environment which is toxic, people burn out, you open yourselves to potentially fraudulent activity and even bankruptcy, as we have seen in some cases. So there is a negative aspect. We don't want to dwell on that. We want to focus very much on the positive. And if you can get it right, as we've seen with Clinton, you can significantly improve employee health, the engagement, productivity, retention, recruitment, and brand image. Awareness and training, particularly of managers, is critical here, because they are the critical link in an organization that touches your frontline staff and also your external contacts. Ethical Reading's HEW online training program is available now. We've seen Clinton go through the modules to help you realize these improvements, and you can book if you click on that QR code, or just you go to the events on our website. Thank you for listening, and we do hope to see you again on the modules. Goodbye.